With a softer schedule looming, can the Royals heat up to make up for some lost ground? We'll give you our thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also catch us on wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, we're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners out there, here's how the format works. We give you episodes Monday through Friday, and unless it's an off day like tonight, we will be bringing you those episodes after the game. So tomorrow night, you can expect a recap sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m., just because I'll have some stuff going on that evening, but we'll be sure to get it up before midnight. Then on Wednesday, we'll have another recap around that same time. Thursday, it will be a day game, so you can look for that recap around 5 o'clock-ish. And then on Friday, we'll have that Mailbag Friday where we get to your questions. Nowadays, really because of this podcast growth, we can't get to every single question. That used to be our theme, that no matter how many questions we had, we were going to answer it in a 30-minute episode. Now we're getting about 60 a week, so we just can't squeeze all of them in there. But if you really want your question to be answered, you can always direct message me, and I will be sure to get you an answer by the end of the weekend. We also bring you 60-second recaps after the game, so you can look for those on the YouTube page as well. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money, and with Monarch Money, you can take control of your finances and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first year. Well, thankfully, that nightmare of a road trip is finally over. The Royals were in Cleveland, they were in New York, and then they wrapped it up in Detroit, and all they came away with was 2 wins. Now sitting at 9-14 on the season, they still have, by runs per game, one of the worst offenses in all of baseball. But as baseball usually goes, the game you least expect to win is the one sometimes you find a way to. And that was Sunday in a nutshell, where the Royals go into Detroit. They had lost the first 3 games of the series. They hadn't gotten much offensive help. Their pitching had not been very good either, when you include the starts from Michael Lorenzen and Cole Reagan. Seth Lugo was fine. He just made a critical mistake to Spencer Torkelson on that Saturday game. But on Sunday, with Michael Wacha on the bump, you get some offensive production from Drew Waters. You got it from Bobby Witt Jr., and you got it from Mark Canha, who was just reinstated from the IL. And then you find a way to win it in extras. Carlos Estevez goes 2 innings. You watched that game. You had your takeaways from it. And now they've turned the page, and they're looking forward to this homestand in which they'll see the 4-win Colorado Rockies, and they will see a sub-500 Houston team. The big question becomes, does Sunday do anything for this team? Now, under Matt Quatraro, it has been a group that doesn't really dwell on the good or the bad. Like when they're playing really good baseball and they've won 5 or 6 in a row, they're not worrying about the 5 or 6 they just won. They're worried about the next game. And that goes pretty much hand in hand with when they're in a losing streak. They're not worried about what happened the day before. I will say this off day came at the perfect time. You could tell that some of these guys were really laboring. They've been dealing with some injuries. We'll talk about that in the third segment. But they get to come back home. They get to rest in their own homes. They get to go to bed in their own beds. They're not traveling. They're not having to get on a late flight. They will have an entire week to stay in Kansas City and play a bad Rockies team and an underperforming Houston team at this point in time. So can they get hot? Really, the correct response I should give you is they got to prove it to me that they can take what happened on Sunday and rattle off a couple of series wins in a row. It would be unrealistic to say, go out there and sweep the Rockies and the Astros to get you back to 15-14. But that's their goal. Hey, we're going to win every single time out. But the realistic goal is probably, let's just take each and every series. We're not going to erase a 5-game deficit or 4.5-game deficit on one night, right? Tomorrow night when they face the Rockies, it shouldn't be, well, we got to bludgeon these guys because they're so bad. It should be get the offense going, but more importantly, win the game. And then it just goes from week to week to week after that, or really day by day after that. And if you can string together a couple of good wins, you get the offense clicking. We know this pitching staff can get it done and they can hold down the fort. But there are some concerns of mine when you look at this offense and if they can really get things going. Now, even though they won on Sunday, they only got 4 runs again. So they are continuing this long stretch of play, over 15 games now, if I'm not mistaken, where they haven't scored more than 4 runs in a game. And that is absolutely alarming because there's been some numbers brought up. One of them brought up from my coworker in Curtis Siebold, who always does a great job putting out the Royals stats that, he's done a lot of digging for, but the numbers are not good when you look at a team that's gone 15 plus games scoring 4 runs or less in the era where there has been a DH and none of them had made the postseason. So you bring up those numbers and you go, man, it is the first month of the season, but the track record's not good when you've got an offense that can perform like this. The flip side, if you want to be an optimist, is that, the Royals played very poorly on this road trip. They faced some pretty tough teams. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to beat good teams to get to their ultimate goal. I mean, you can't just say, well, those are good teams. We don't need to worry about beating them. Let's just worry about the bad teams. No, I've always thought you need to play 500 against those teams. And then, you got to beat up on those bad teams. And that should put you anywhere from 10 to 20 games over 500 when it's all said and done. And most importantly, that puts you in the postseason. But they had a brutal road trip. It's in the past now. But the question becomes, was that the worst we will see the Royals play all season long? And I can see both sides to it. Because there were times with bad Royals teams where they'd have an ugly April and you go, well, that's probably as bad as it could get. But to quote former Royals manager Buddy Bell, never say it can't get worse, right? That's a foolish way to go about things. Right, to look at that road trip, to look at the 6-game losing streak and say, hey, last year they didn't have a 7-game losing streak until September, the very end of the year. They didn't get swept until June, I believe. They were really good at avoiding sweeps early on in the season, and that kept their head above water even when things got tough. But is this stretch of play the worst we'll see from them, where the offense has given you 2 runs a night if you're lucky? Now, you go 15, 16 games, that's give or take 5 series where you can't score more than 4 runs in any game. You've been shut out a handful of times. Like, can that happen again? I would say that it can, but it comes down to your belief in the team. If you are higher on this group than most, then I would say that what you saw in the last, week and a half, that's the worst it'll be. And if that's the worst it'll be, well, you better start responding to it pretty well. Where you've got 25 games here. I don't know if they're in a row. They might have an off day or 2 in between a few of those series. But 25 games ahead of them, where 22 of them are against teams in 4th place or worse. And look, that can change, right? You have Baltimore in this stretch of games. You've got Tampa Bay in this stretch of games. You've got Houston. Do you believe those teams are 4th place or worse? Maybe Tampa Bay or Baltimore because they're in such a brutal division. I don't believe Houston is 4th place or worse. I believe Houston can win the AL West when it's all said and done. But just the numbers we've been given through 20 some odd games, these are teams that are either not very good or they are not performing at a high level. Where the Royals just got done on a road trip facing Cleveland, who's above 500, New York, who's leading their division, and Detroit, who's leading the AL Central. And you go back before that, you got Minnesota, you had Baltimore. Those are 2 teams under 500, right? So you had played better against the teams that aren't playing well, are playing like you are. And the Royals can't puff out their chest and say, well, we've got some bad teams in front of us, because by definition, with just pointing out those teams, the Royals fall into that category. Like Colorado may be looking at the Royals and saying, we're not any good, but at least we're not running into Detroit right now. At least we're not running into the Yankees. Now we're facing a Royals team that hasn't scored more than 4 runs in a couple of weeks now. Like, it's been a while since we've seen the offense put together a great 1 through 9. 2 hours of great offense. It's been a while since we've seen that. So I don't see the Royals looking at this stretch and saying, well, we're much better than these teams. We should take care of business. You want to have that confidence, but it's also treating the Rockies like a worthy opponent. You can't overlook them. It's baseball. Even bad teams can get you. And I believe that it's pretty important that this Royals team come out tomorrow night and the night after that and the day game after that with some ferocity, where you go out there and bludgeon a bad baseball team. And the way last year, that when they saw Chicago twice in the first month of the season, they won 6 of 7. Like, go sweep Colorado. Colorado's a bad baseball team, whether you want to look at their pitching or you look at their offense. And you're not playing like a good baseball team right now, but you go and you sweep Colorado, you're all of a sudden 12-14, and maybe Detroit drops a few and Cleveland drops a few, and you're like 2 games back. Not that we should be focusing on the standings, but you get my point. You don't feel as bad about the road trip anymore because you're on a 4-game winning streak and you got Houston coming into town. But who knows what Houston looks like here by the end of the week. So the Royals get a bad team coming to Kauffman Stadium, the worst team they've faced to date. But they're also not playing great ball. Do you believe that this is the time for the Royals to get a little hot? Or do you feel that we're about to see the same old messy offense? And it's going to be a very disappointing series, and maybe the one after that against the Colorado Rockies and the Houston Astros. Let us know in the YouTube comments below. But coming up next, let's talk about MJ Melendez. He got optioned on Saturday, so we didn't have time to talk about it in an episode, but we'll get to it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Want to give a shout out to the title sponsor tonight in Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for half off on your first year. The big news of the weekend, other than the Royals, piling up the losses between New York and Detroit, but then snapping that losing streak on Sunday, was the news of MJ Melendez getting optioned down to Omaha. And I got to go back to an answer I gave a listener on Mailbag Friday, which was about Mark Canha getting reinstated and what the corresponding move would be. In that answer, I said, it's going to be Drew Waters. That was my guess. That was my hunch, that with Mark Canha coming off the IL, you brought up Drew Waters to give you some time while Mark Canha was healing up that hip, I believe it was classified as, that injury. And then Drew Waters ultimately didn't do enough to stay in Kansas City. I was wrong on it. And I wasn't so sure that the Royals were going to make a move with MJ Melendez this early on in the season. I had gotten so many mailbag questions about MJ and Hunter Renfroe and how long will their leash be. And I always thought that MJ would have the longer leash than Hunter Renfroe. Now, we now are familiar with the fact that he's got minor league options. He's able to go down to Omaha. He's able to build his confidence a little bit. That's also going to take him playing well in Omaha, because it can go the opposite way where you get demoted. You're already in your head about it a little bit, and now you got the pressure of, well, it should be easy for you. You are a big league hitter. You have more than even 50 to 100 games at the big league level. You should be able to dominate AAA pitching. But that's pressure of the front office and the coaching staff saying, you should be back up here in about a month or two. You should make it easy for us to make that decision. Where if you start hitting 350 in AAA, you fixed a couple of problems with your swing, and now it can translate to the big league level. That is pressure. But the Royals making this move, to me, yes, was about numbers. Because you look at the 085 batting average, and there's no way you can defend it. And I like MJ. I root for MJ. And an 085 batting average doesn't mean I don't like the guy at all. It just means that I can't defend the play. I can't say, well, give him more of an opportunity here. He's a young guy. It's April. I can't use those excuses when MJ Melendez now has been in the big league since 2022. If this was a rookie, you view it a little bit differently. He does need more time. He does need more at-bats. And maybe the writing was on the wall in Detroit when Drew Waters started back-to-back games against right-handed pitchers, and we didn't see MJ Melendez at all. And even at the end of the game on Saturday, when Kyle Isbell's up, and it's 1st and 3rd, and the Royals are down by 2, you don't see MJ come off the bench. I believe a little bit of that is because MJ's hitting 085, and Kyle Isbell has had a better year than him to this point, but also that this was going to be the move. That they weren't going to call him up in a big spot and then demote him the next day. They wanted to keep him on the bench in case of emergencies. Then Mark Canha gets reinstated, and you saw MJ Melendez. Now, actually, I do take that back. I'm thinking of the wrong night. Saturday, he had already been optioned. On Friday's the one I'm thinking of, where they did bring the tying run to the plate multiple times. Kevin Biggio stayed in to hit. You had Drew Waters staying in to hit. And I thought, man, if you need one big swing, hell, MJ did it last year in Detroit where he had the go-ahead 3-run home run. He also had the go-ahead grand slam in L.A. He had the 9th inning home run against Seattle. So I thought that was a good opportunity for MJ to get in there, and it didn't happen. So apologize. I was thinking of the wrong day. He had already been optioned on Saturday. So it was Friday where he wasn't pinch hit or didn't get in as a pinch hitter in that game. Now it's about Drew Waters, too, where Drew Waters has not played well. He's just earned more of an opportunity. And I do believe that it's sending a little message to the guys down in AAA where, hey, if you come up here and you play well, you might stick around. Where if you demote Drew Waters and you keep MJ Melendez, who had options, then you might be sending the wrong message of no matter what you do, we're still going to keep Melendez and Renfroe over a guy that's coming up for someone that's injured, that's going to be gone for 10 games. And that doesn't spark much motivation. Yes, it would be a big deal if John Rave is promoted, if Javier Vaz is promoted, if Tyler Gentry, Nick Lofton, one of those guys is promoted. But this was almost a message of, yeah, we can't roster somebody that's hitting 085 and hasn't shown many signs of getting out of a slump. He had the home run in New York off Max Fried. You could tell the weight that had been lifted off his shoulders. It just didn't translate into games after that. And for Hunter Renfroe, I'm kind of at the same point there. He still has not homered. Right? You've got Kyle Isbell now, who has homered 2 times. You've got Michael Garcia, who has homered 2 times. There's not a lot of power with this team. I mean, they only hit 11 home runs so far through 25 games, which I believe ranks dead last in all of baseball. Not saying you're going to need power from everybody, but if you're going to hit $110, I got to look for something at the plate that you can do well. And for the Royals, it was not to humiliate MJ. It's not that they are giving up on MJ. It is to go down there and get right. And I do envision seeing him again this season. And I will stand firm on the point that a good to average bench bat is incredibly valuable, especially one from the left side. You've got it right now in Mark Canha. And who knows, I believe Mark Canha could be starting a lot of games here in the future now that MJ's in AAA. Because if you want Michael Garcia in the lineup every single day, which I imagine the Royals do with the way he's been playing and how he looked on the road trip, well, you're not going to move Jonathan India out of the lineup. We all know that. So India is either going to be in left or he's going to be at third. And Garcia is either going to be at second, right, center, or third. You have those two guys in the lineup. Drew Waters might get in there. So that's another outfield spot. So then it comes down to, do you want Mark Canha or Hunter Renfroe? Both right-handed bats, one of them playing much better than the other. So that's another part to this move where if MJ was still on the team, he might be in there against right-handed pitchers, and then Renfroe's in there against left-handed pitchers. Now you got two right-handed corner outfielders. So it does open up a door, and it opens up an opportunity for Mark Canha, which I know a lot of Royals fans listening will be thrilled about. But for MJ, the road is not done. It is not over in Kansas City. He just needs to go down to Omaha and get right. And it's a hell of a lot easier to fix a swing and get mentally right down in AAA than it is at the big league level. Okay, let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about some of these injuries the Royals have been dealing with and why health is vitally important so early on in the season. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you get podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Our final segment is going to be evaluating the injury report for the Royals and why this early on in the season, it has suddenly become an important topic. Whereas last year, they had a clean bill of health for the most part. There weren't many guys that were going down with injuries, and if they were, it was due to a freak thing. Like Michael Wacha and Alec Marsh both went on the injured list for comebackers to the mound that hit them, which brings me to Lucas Erceg, where he gets drilled by a 107-mile-an-hour line drive off his heel on Friday, I want to say it was, and that kept him out for Saturday. Matt Quatrero did say he was available on Sunday. They just didn't really want to go to him unless they absolutely had to. So it appears they dodged a bullet. He was day-to-day with a foot contusion. But to not have Erceg yesterday and to not have Hunter Harvey, who's going to be working back from his injury, it's becoming a little bit of an issue with this bullpen. Because the last thing you want in April is a bullpen that is just being pieced together. Because you're relying on guys that just aren't supposed to be late inning guys. And we saw how good it was early in the season. And I say early, we're 25 games in. It still technically is early. But you don't have Hunter Harvey. You should have Lucas Erceg. You did dodge a bullet there. Carlos Estevez is still building up his arm and building up that velocity. I believe he's getting closer and closer, but still 93 to 94 is not his typical velocity. You're dealing with that injury. You had Mark Canha go on the IL. And that's not a lot of guys that we're talking about here. That's not an abundance of players that are winding up on the IL. I'll throw Sam Long in there, but I'm a big believer in the phantom IL where a guy's struggling. Hey, you just, shelve them for 2 weeks with, forearm tightness or shoulder soreness, something like that. But Evan Sisk and Steven Cruz have done a really good job in their place, Hunter Harvey and Sam Long, with picking up the bullpen a little bit. Hasn't been pretty, right? Hasn't been perfect, but they haven't allowed a run yet. Steven Cruz has appeared in a couple of games. Evan Sisk, same thing. They're racking up the strikeout numbers. They are dealing with base runners, but still, it could be a lot worse when you look at that portion of the bullpen. So, when looking at the lineup, when looking at the rotation, looking at the bullpen, I'm now evaluating these groups when it comes to who you can't lose. When it's the bullpen, if I'm picking one guy, it's Lucas Erceg, which is why Friday was just an all-around terrible night, where the Royals once again were losing. He's only in the game to get some work in because he hadn't thrown in 5 days, and he gets drilled by a comebacker, and you think, man, is that fractured? Where now we aren't going to see him for a long time. Like, he's the one guy in the bullpen you can't lose. Cole Reagans is the one guy in the rotation you can't lose. Bobby Witt Jr. is the one guy in the rotation you can't lose. This all feels very undeniable. There's no argumentative point here, and if you do have somebody else you would like to replace those players with, feel free to let us know in the comments below. But it's also important to have your secondary guys stay healthy. And that's Chris Bubich and Seth Lugo. right? In the lineup, that's Jonathan India and Vinny Pasquantino. And with the lineup, it poses a little bit more of a problem based off how they've played. And the big contributors in this lineup are going to be hitting in the top four. It's Jonathan India, it's Bobby Witt Jr., it's Vinny Pasquantino, and it's Salvador Perez. I am going to throw in that Michael Garcia can be that number 5. Michael Massey can still be another hitter you can count on. But the outfield is not a group you're going to be counting on every single night. You are not going to be asking them to drive the bus offensively. So that does bring me back to the top of the order. If one of those guys goes down, which is why the Jonathan India quad tightness struck a little fear or struck a little anxiety point in me. Because losing Jonathan India, even though he's not hitting that well, he's getting on base at one of the better clips on the team, which isn't a very high bar so far. You also know how vital he is to this offense, because when he does get going, that is a perfect leadoff hitter for Bobby Witt Jr. If Vinny goes down, you might be turning to somebody at the minor league level. You might be going through free agency, in the same way you had to last year when he went down with the fractured thumb. Losing those guys in the lineup, that's where if you think they struggled in this road trip, it could look a lot worse than it really did. Maybe not. Maybe you could have somebody step up and fill in that role nicely. It's just more of a talking point now in April of 2025 than it was in April of 2024. The Royals got off to a better start. They were very healthy. There was more than 1 or 2 guys in their lineup that were hitting. The rotation was flawless. The bullpen had sucked. And for the bullpen, they are the group that has been hit the hardest with injuries because it has been key guys. Like you had your HEE at the back end of the bullpen. And that still is going to be a thing for the Royals in 2025. You really got to hope that the rehab process for Hunter Harvey goes well and you get him back healthy. Lucas Erceg, I'm not overly worried about at this point because the Royals didn't seem too concerned. They feel they dodged a bullet. And Carlos Estevez, despite not throwing 97 to 99 like we're accustomed to, he's become very productive in the 9th inning. And yesterday, I would say even with B-plus stuff, he gets through 2 scoreless innings to snap the losing streak. That's the type of professional closer you have. You have your fireman with Lucas Erceg. You need Hunter Harvey back. Because now I'm looking at the bullpen, and with the way Steven Cruz and Evan Sisk had pitched, the Royals are going to be able to make that decision hopefully very soon. I'm going off the fly here with Hunter Harvey that he was put on the IL right before the Cleveland series, which, that was a 10-game road trip there, but it was retroactive to a few days before that. So we're coming up to when he is eligible to return from the injured list. Looks like it would have been back on, so Canna went on his rehab assignment April 15th. You did have Harvey go on it on April 11th, which was retroactive to April 8th. So the 15-day IL would be up on Wednesday, which would be game 2 of that Colorado series. But that's just him being eligible to return from the right teres major strain. I believe that's the way you pronounce it. Again, I'm not a doctor, so don't quote me on it. I believe that's how you pronounce it. So that will be retroactive to April 8th, which means that he is eligible to come off the injured list on Wednesday. My point is that if Hunter Harvey comes back, the Royals can make that decision to keep Steven Cruz over Chris Stratton. Now your bullpen has the power with Steven Cruz. You got the funky lefty look with Evan Sisk, and they replaced Sam Long and Chris Stratton, who had been the 2 guys who have struggled the most in 2025. Then you got Serpa, Schreiber as your middle inning guys. You have Lynch, and then you would have Harvey, Erceg, and Estevez in that bullpen. That feels like a group that can reach a new height, but it's all about health. And with Harvey, that's what I'm looking for. He doesn't need to return until he's 100% healthy because we saw what he looked like last year when he was banged up. He was nowhere close to the pitcher that he was to begin this year. That's been my main takeaway with the injuries. Hopefully they can have some good fortune shine on them, and we're not going to have to worry about too many bad injuries over the next handful of months. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we'll be bringing you a very late night episode after the Royals take on the Rockies. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.